Let me just divert for a moment from the life. Do you in fact use models a lot in your work, or is it? I mean, you're doing a lot of sculpture these days.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's figurative sculpture. Well, at least to a large degree. Do you work from models then, or do you work from imagination, memory?
Well, it's something. Drawing directly from the model is something I've always thought one should do. Well, perhaps not always now. I've always felt this was a kind of duty. It was part of the art school training, and it was instilled into me that if you couldn't draw the model, then you couldn't be a very good artist. And one imbibes these ideas when one's young, and they stay with you, and they're very difficult to get rid of, some of them. Now I think that in many respects the way in which I draw and my attitude towards it in terms of this being a necessity could have been different, and I think now I could quite easily work from the model and make a drawing which would be much more creative. But I think I've managed to free myself to a large extent. Nevertheless, that training, or the drawing that I have done, has made me so familiar with the human body. When I'm making a piece of sculpture, I know that if I'm pushing something in, that it really should be pushed out, and I know what I'm doing in that sense. And I can draw a figure perhaps, well, I'm sure, much more easily than I would have been able to without the training.
So the drawing is a discipline, a pleasure, and also a kind of way of knowing. Something you learn through drawing, you think?
It's drawing for me is different things. It's particularly with landscape, it's discovering what is there and experiencing it in a special way. Sometimes it's discovering something in a picture. There's a painting in the National Gallery, Diana Actaeon, which I look at every time I go there. I had it on my bedroom wall when I was a student. And one day, after having seen it, I suppose, hundreds of times, I went into the National Gallery, decided that I would stand in front of it and do a drawing of it. And I had a sense that I'd never actually seen this picture before, never looked at it. So I know that it is that process of standing, drawing something, analysing it in a drawing, that enables you to see something in a new way. And I do that with landscape. Go out and sit down in a landscape on a walk and simply draw not just what's in front of me, but a few that I've chosen. And for me, that is an experience which is a drawing experience, which is very important to me. But it's not the only one. This morning we were coming on the train, and I had a sketchbook in front of me. There were a whole lot of little children there coming up for some presentation in Southwark Church or Southwark Cathedral. And I was sitting there, my wife was sitting opposite to me, and I was looking at my little sketchbook and thinking of a mark I would make on it, closing my eyes and making the mark. And I look at that and I think I'll make another mark, then closing my eyes and making another mark. And it's very interesting I've discovered this quite recently when you do this, that the assemblage of marks that you make is incredibly fascinating. It's a bit like drawing on the bus. You get a kind of sensitive, nice line which you would never get if you were trying to draw carefully. And I suddenly realised that just on the other side there were all these children all bringing away and talking and watching this man closing his eyes and drawing. And so we ended up by showing the children my sketchbook, and then a lovely young girl from Mozambique who was looking after some of these children. And we talked about this exhibition, and I showed a little leaflet I had. But that process of drawing in that way is totally different, of course, from standing in front of something and observing it and analysing it.
I like the idea of an inspirational train journey. This is something that I think British Rail or South Eastern Rail could easily capitalise on. So was drawing much emphasised at the Slade?
Oh yes, when I went to the Slade, the Euston Road group were there. William Coldstream, Claude Rogers was my tutor, William Townsend and so on. And when we first went to the Slade, we were sat down, as this audience here is sat down and told that the emphasis at Slade is drawing. and some of us more or less followed that. I did find that it was a bit constricting, this feeling that around you were these Euston Road people who would really like you to be standing in front of your easel and measuring as somebody like you and Uglow did. And he even took it further, this business of rigid drawing of what's in front of you. I could never really come to terms with that. In fact, the Slade was a very difficult time.
But in his case, it's always seemed to me that it's also a way of distancing yourself from an involvement, a real engagement with the emotional aspects of the subject.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's the scientist's withdrawal from making into an object, as it were, the thing that they're looking at.
Yes, I wouldn't know what other people think of Uglow's work, but I do find looking at an Uglow painting sometimes that I feel my flesh is creeping. This is somebody who's really been subjected, that the actual person has been subjected to the process, which is not very nice.
So you were at the Slade, and who there are the memorable teachers for you?
Oh, teachers.
Yeah.
I find it difficult. Occasionally somebody would say something which would be of some significance. On the whole, I found the teaching not very useful. But they had a number of visiting lecturers, and one of those was Keith Horn. Keith Horn saw me several times, and he was very sympathetic. He saw my work first of all, and I was using rather flat colours. He said, "Yes, you're going to be making posters, aren't you?" And I was really, really stung by that. And then he came back, and I'd discovered Cubism, which was the highlight, really, of my time in Slade. It gave me a feeling, at last, I could actually control what I was doing, and I would be saying something which I felt very much about. I took some Cubist pictures along to him and said, "Yes, that's better." And I remember he said, strange thing in a way, he said, "I think there's room for another Cubist."
Well, was it very fashionable then?
It wasn't, no. And in fact, I remember William Coldstream said to me, I took some work to show him, and he said, "Well, yes, I suppose it's 50 years old, but there's no harm in doing it."
Well, you have to
It was
start
a
somewhere.
bit patronising, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So it wasn't a particularly inspiring experience being at the Slade.
No, and I think a lot of students would say this, that it wasn't the tutors at all, it was your fellow students, what they were doing, that gave you ideas or that stirred things up a bit. Oh yes, Lucien Freud came in, I remember once, and looked at my painting and started chatting, and they said, "Would you like to come to a party tonight?" I thought, I felt a bit threatened. And in fact, I organised the Slade Ball. Once a year there was a Slade Ball, and I'd become the social secretary, and I organised this thing, and in fact the whole of that term was completely swept away as far as work went. It was all about organising this thing, and a friend and I'd suggested him that we go as statues in the forest. It was under Slade Wood, that was the title of it. So we made these plaster mask helmet things, which turned out to be so weighty that we could hardly move. And I was involved with this, and I had things to do before the ball, and it was, in fact, that was what Lucien Freud was inviting me to. He said, I'll pick you up in my car. And I think in retrospect, oh damn it, I could have gone to the Slade Ball with Lucien Freud, but I'm terribly sorry, but I'm organising the Slade Ball. So that was that.
The path not taken.
I'm afraid.
Yeah. And what about after you graduated from the Slade, which would have been in
1957.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And did you? How did you earn your living then? How did you keep the wolf from the door?
I didn't know. I had all sorts of ideas about what I might do. I'd had a short job in a holiday with a marquee erecting firm, and I quite like the idea of being out and doing manual work. And I went up to Sheffield and got a job in a steel factory. It was only because I paid somebody for lodgings, and then I was let down. They pretended they didn't know me when I turned up, and I couldn't find anywhere to stay. So I thought, this is no good, and I suddenly thought, well, why don't I go back to London and do a teaching course? I think I can get a grant for that. So that's what I did. I went back and did a teaching course. And in fact, in that year, the course was quite relaxed in a way, and I did an awful lot of painting. And my painting really got going. It was a kind of expressionist thing that began to come out. But after that, I was uncertain what to do, and all of a sudden I felt London is so artificial. I think it was the country boy in me coming out. And I just wanted to get away. I wanted open spaces. And I tried to get a job in the Far East, and then somebody offered me a job in Rhodesia, in Africa, starting up an art department in the public school. And I took that.
So, Deliberate Holiday, the work that we have downstairs, this came from around that time?
Yes, that was during the teacher training course. They wanted us to do a thesis, and they suggested things like, studying designs on around doorways or railings, and I thought, oh no, that doesn't interest me at all. So I thought, I'll just write about myself. That shouldn't be too difficult. They can't complain about that. So I wrote. There's a print of the double page here in the exhibition. A thesis they would have called it, called Deliberate Holiday, which is a part of a poem by William Wordsworth. And I've never really done any writing, and what surprises me now, looking back at that, is in a sense, I have to take somebody else's opinion for it rather than mine perhaps, but how well it's written. I found no difficulty at all about writing on aspects of my childhood. A lovely garden that I used to go to. A curious incident where somebody was going to be setting up a shell crushing factory next to us, and that never happened, and the beach, what the beach looked like, and so on. All these various things.
Well, I have to say the writing's very good. It's very lyrical, very controlled, and it's very well complemented by the illustrations. And I also like the way in which it's also had a quality of unfinishedness about it, with blank pages. Sometimes there's I don't know whether anyone's seen this text, but sometimes there's a wonderful illustration on the right-hand side. There's a little Roman numeral on the left and no writing. Wonderful. It's a space for the reader's imagination to go on a journey.